Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a system where justice is a luxury only the wealthy can afford, a system where the poorest and most vulnerable are left to navigate the complex, unforgiving criminal justice system alone. But there is a force fighting back, the public defenders, the unsung heroes standing between the accused and a broken system. Today, we delve into the fight for fairness, the battle for justice, and the relentless pursuit of a legal system that works for everyone regardless of their wealth. Stay with me as we uncover the untold story of those who risk everything to ensure justice for all. And the 1948 Plentiful Advocate Act, a significant milestone in the development of public defender services in the United States, marked a pivotal moment in the evolution of criminal defense for indigent individuals. Prior to this legislation, the right to competent legal representation was not consistently afforded to all defendants, especially those unable to afford private counsel. The Plentiful Advocate Act sought to address this imbalance by mandating the establishment of publicly funded legal services for individuals who could not secure private legal representation. This act was a response to growing concerns over the fairness of the criminal justice system and the disproportionate impact of legal costs on poor and marginalized populations. And the passage of the 1948 Act formalized the role of public defenders, ensuring that indigent defendants would be provided with qualified legal counsel. This was an important step in aligning the United States legal system with the ideals of equality and justice, as it acknowledged the constitutional right of every accused individual to have the assistance of counsel regardless of their financial standing. The Act also highlighted the increasing recognition of the need for specialized legal professionals who could navigate the complex criminal justice system, as public defenders were tasked with defending clients in an often overwhelming number of cases, stretching the resources available for effective legal representation. And although the Plentiful Advocate Act made significant strides, the implementation and effectiveness of public defender services faced numerous challenges. One of the main concerns was the underfunding and overburdening of public defender offices, leading to a crisis of insufficient resources, inadequate staff, and case overload. Public defenders often found themselves with limited time and resources to devote to each case, which in turn impacted the quality of defense available to indigent defendants. This was compounded by the growing caseloads as crime rates increased during the post-war era, placing further strain on the public defender system. And in addition to the logistical challenges, the Plentiful Advocate Act also raised questions about the professionalization and independence of public defenders. While the Act sought to ensure access to legal representation, it also called for the balancing of efficiency and quality of defense, a concern that continues to shape debates surrounding public defender systems today. The pressures of managing large caseloads often meant that public defenders had to make difficult choices about which cases to prioritize, a dilemma that could undermine the quality of defense for all clients. And as the years progressed, the need for reform within the public defender system became more apparent. Advocates for criminal justice reform pointed to the continued systemic flaws within public defender services, citing not only underfunding but also the lack of adequate training and support. Defenders who were often seen as overwhelmed or disillusioned by the systemic barriers they faced. Over time, further legislative efforts were made to improve public defender services, but the legacy of the 1948 Plentiful Advocate Act remains significant in the broader context of American legal history. It laid the foundation for modern public defense systems and highlighted the ongoing struggle for equality and access within the criminal justice system. And as the years unfolded, it became increasingly clear that while the Plentiful Advocate Act had created a necessary framework, it was only the beginning of a long journey toward achieving justice for all individuals regardless of their socio-economic status. The reality that public defenders were stretched thin, overwhelmed by soaring caseloads, revealed a fundamental flaw in the system. This issue was not merely a question of fairness, but of the fundamental principles on which the justice system was built. It raised an essential question: can true justice be served when the defense of the accused is compromised due to systemic overburdening? And in the face of these challenges, however public defenders continued to embody the spirit of justice and equality, despite the obstacles they fought tirelessly to ensure that every individual had a voice, that each person had a right to be heard in a court of law. The public defender's role is not simply a professional one. It is a mission driven by a deep commitment to the idea that every individual deserves a fair trial and every voice deserves to be considered. While the system might not have provided them with the resources necessary to achieve this goal easily, public defenders became the unsung heroes working within a system that was often flawed but still striving for the same ideal of justice for all. And this unwavering dedication to serving the public interest is what continues to inspire many to pursue a career in criminal defense. The notion that public defenders serve not only their clients but the very fabric of democracy itself is a powerful one. Public defenders are the guardians of fairness, ensuring that the system does not become one that only serves the privileged few. They are at the heart of the criminal justice system, not just as defenders of individuals, but as advocates for the integrity of the system as a whole. Their work challenges us to reflect on the deeper moral principles that underpin the law: equality, fairness, and the fundamental right to a defense irrespective of one's financial circumstances. And the journey from the Plentiful Advocate Act to the present day has been one of continuous evolution and reform, driven by the recognition that every citizen, regardless of wealth or background, must have access to competent legal counsel. Over the decades, a growing awareness of the need for reform and better funding for public defenders has led to several initiatives aimed at improving the system. From advocacy for increased government funding to initiatives aimed at ensuring better training and support for defenders, the quest for a more robust and equitable public defense system has only gained momentum. But even with these improvements, the challenges remain. Public defenders are still fighting an uphill battle, with some areas facing more dramatic shortages than others. Yet even amidst these challenges, the unwavering dedication to justice remains a driving force. Public defenders continue to stand in the gap, ensuring that the rights of the accused are protected regardless of how difficult the task may be. They are not only advocates for their clients, they are advocates for justice itself. Each case they handle, each person they defend, represents a step forward in the pursuit of a justice system that is truly accessible to all. And this commitment to justice requires a profound understanding of the human condition, empathy, and a willingness to stand up for what is right even when the odds are stacked against them. The work of public defenders goes beyond legal arguments and courtroom tactics. It is about making sure that the criminal justice system does not falter in its commitment to fairness and equality. These defenders are the advocates of those who may otherwise be overlooked, whose voices might otherwise be silenced. And public defenders, by their very nature, are agents of change. They are the ones who challenge the status quo, pushing for a system that can be both efficient and just. It is their work, often behind the scenes, that pushes the boundaries of what is possible within the criminal justice system. As the legal system continues to evolve, so too will the role of public defenders. They will continue to fight for the integrity of the system, striving for a day when every individual, no matter their background, can walk into a courtroom with the certainty that their rights will be upheld. And the Plentiful Advocate Act was not an endpoint, but rather a catalyst, a crucial step in the ongoing fight for justice. It set in motion a movement that has grown over the decades, evolving as society itself evolves, shaped by the experiences and struggles of those who have fought for a system that works for everyone. Public defenders are not merely legal representatives, they are champions of the people, working tirelessly to ensure that the scales of justice remain balanced. And as the legal landscape evolved, it became increasingly apparent that the systemic challenges faced by public defenders were not merely administrative issues, but deeply ingrained structural barriers. While the Plentiful Advocate Act had been a significant first step in ensuring that the right to counsel was more universally applied, it had also illuminated a crucial gap in the implementation of that right. The overburdened public defender system, struggling with insufficient funding, inadequate resources, and overwhelming caseloads, revealed the extent to which the justice system was still fractured when it came to serving the most vulnerable. Public defenders, though essential in upholding the principle of justice, often found themselves fighting not just for their clients, but for the very system of fairness they were sworn to protect. And this scenario unfortunately led to a persistent cycle of underperformance in some public defender offices, where defenders were tasked with managing hundreds, even thousands of cases annually. In such an environment, the level of defense provided could not possibly meet the ideals of a fair trial. The legal philosophy underpinning the Plentiful Advocate Act had envisioned an accessible and equitable defense for all, yet the overwhelming caseloads detracted from the core principle of effective legal representation. The model designed to promote equality in the justice system was itself becoming a victim of systemic neglect. The result was that public defenders, despite their noble commitment, were often unable to provide the level of defense necessary to guarantee a fair trial. And as the situation worsened, it became clear that meaningful reform would require more than just an increase in funding or an expansion of resources. It would require a shift in how the criminal justice system viewed the role of public defenders, and by extension, the entire approach to indigent defense. Reform advocates began pushing for a more holistic approach to justice that would not only address the overload of cases, but also emphasize the quality of legal services provided to the accused. Legal experts began to argue that the true measure of justice lay not in the number of cases processed, but in the quality of defense each individual received. They highlighted that public defenders should not be seen as mere case managers, but as professional advocates equipped with the tools, training, and support necessary to ensure that the right to a fair trial was upheld. And with time, a growing coalition of policymakers, legal scholars, and reform activists began to champion the cause of public defender reform. They advocated for increased resources to ensure manageable caseloads, better compensation for defenders, and more comprehensive training. They argued for the establishment of public defender offices that would not only be staffed with qualified attorneys, but would also offer a support network of investigators, experts, and social workers resources that are vital to providing a comprehensive defense. Moreover, they called for changes to the broader criminal justice system, urging the decriminalization of certain offenses and the reduction of unnecessary incarceration, which would in turn alleviate pressure on public defenders and the criminal justice system as a whole. And simultaneously, public defenders themselves, recognizing the challenges they faced, began organizing and advocating for their profession. They voiced concerns about the professionalization of public defense, calling for better working conditions and increased job security. These efforts, along with public pressure for systemic change, eventually led to a number of reforms that sought to address the root causes of the problem. In some areas, public defender offices were granted greater independence from political influence, while in others, public defender organizations were given more autonomy to design and implement innovative defense strategies, and however, the fight for reform was far from over. The system continued to wrestle with resource allocation, inadequate compensation, and political resistance to widespread change. Public defenders, despite the reforms, often found themselves on the front lines of a system that still struggled to meet the needs of the accused. But in their commitment to justice, they continued to challenge the status quo, pushing for a system that could more effectively balance the need for efficiency with the necessity of ensuring fair and competent legal representation for all individuals, irrespective of their socioeconomic status. Public defenders did not merely serve as legal practitioners. They became the voice for reform, advocating not only for their clients, but for a justice system that reflected the true meaning of fairness and equality under the law. Through their relentless dedication, they continued to play a crucial role in shaping the legal landscape, ensuring that the ideals set forth by the Plentiful Advocate Act remained a living reality, even as challenges persisted. And despite the incremental progress achieved, the public defense system continued to confront a multitude of persistent challenges that threatened to undermine the ideals of fairness and equality. The Plentiful Advocate Act had sought to instill, even with the increased advocacy for reform, the systemic changes needed to adequately support public defenders and provide the necessary resources remained elusive in many jurisdictions. The reforms implemented thus far had been reactive rather than proactive, addressing the symptoms of the problem rather than the underlying causes. This failure to fully address the structural inequities within the system meant that public defenders, despite their unwavering commitment, remained encumbered by insurmountable caseloads, insufficient funding, and a lack of professional support. And one of the most significant challenges faced by public defenders was the lack of systemic support to ensure their ability to provide effective legal representation. The nature of their work required not only legal expertise, but also the ability to gather crucial evidence, interview witnesses, and in many cases collaborate with experts in various fields, such as forensic science or psychiatry. However, in many public defender offices, these critical resources were either non-existent or insufficient. The result was that public defenders often had to fight not only against the prosecution, but also against a lack of the very tools necessary to mount an adequate defense. In some cases, this lack of resources led to the inevitable compromise of a defendant's constitutional right to a fair trial, as defenders were forced to make decisions based on insufficient information, and in light of these persistent challenges, a renewed focus on the holistic nature of justice became essential. Reform advocates increasingly recognized that the issue was not just about ensuring legal representation. It was about ensuring that legal representation was competent, comprehensive, and effective. Public defenders needed access to the same resources that private attorneys had the ability to call upon expert testimony, the time to thoroughly investigate cases, and the support of specialized staff to assist in preparing a strong defense. These elements were crucial to maintaining the integrity of the criminal justice system and ensuring that justice was not reserved solely for those who could afford to pay for it. And moreover, the need for systemic reform became more urgent as the criminal justice system itself faced growing scrutiny. The increasing awareness of racial disparities, the over-incarceration crisis, and the erosion of civil liberties brought greater attention to the systemic injustices that existed within the system. Public defenders as frontline advocates for the accused found themselves at the intersection of these critical issues. They were not just defending individual clients, they were defending the very principles of equality and fairness that the justice system was meant to uphold. It became clear that true justice could not be served unless the system recognized and addressed these broader issues, particularly the systemic barriers that disadvantaged marginalized communities. And this recognition led to a growing consensus that public defense reform was intrinsically linked to broader criminal justice reform. Advocates began to push for more comprehensive approaches that went beyond the confines of legal representation. The calls for alternatives to incarceration, the need for greater attention to mental health issues within the criminal justice system, and the desire for more restorative justice practices all became part of the conversation. In many ways, the fight for better public defense was intertwined with the fight for a more just and equitable criminal justice system as a whole. Public defenders, in their dedication to serving indigent clients, became champions for a more humane approach to criminal justice, one that prioritized rehabilitation and fairness over punitive measures, and these efforts brought increased visibility to the importance of public defense as a cornerstone of the justice system. The advocacy for reform sparked greater public awareness of the inherent flaws in the system and the urgent need for change. Slowly but surely, the public defender movement gained traction not just among legal professionals, but also within communities, policy circles, and social justice organizations. This broader coalition of support helped push for the kind of systemic change that would not only improve the conditions under which public defenders worked, but also ensure that the accused received the fair and competent representation they were entitled to under the law. And public defenders, though still working within a system rife with challenges, continued to press forward, embodying the values of justice, equality, and integrity. They became more than just representatives of their clients. They became advocates for a more equitable system, one that could better balance the needs of justice with the realities of resources and societal complexities. Their tireless efforts represented a beacon of hope for those most in need, affirming that the fight for justice was not merely about winning cases, but about upholding the very principles upon which the law itself was built.